Hello everyone, here's a walkthrough of how to use Excel to compute the formulas from topic 3.2, so that's standard deviation and others. First thing you're going to do is just open a workbook. I just saved this one as Stats Workbook 2025 so that I can open the same document. And I'm going to name this first tab this title from the lesson, 3.2 Measures of Dispersion, just so that I can keep saving things in one document and have it all in one place. Now, we're going to create our table from the notes, which means I need the score, the population mean, the difference of the score and the population mean, and the square of the score and the population mean. You don't need these titles. I just find it easier to work with Excel if I know what I'm looking at here. So I remember what each of the columns are going to represent for me. So this is score, that should be an I, sorry. Ignore. And then this mu, xi, so the score minus mu, and then the square of the score minus mu. Okay, cool. So the score we're getting from the notes, the scores from the table were 82, 77, 90, 71, 62, 68, 74, 84, 94, and 88. So those are the 10 scores from question or example 3. Now, mu is the average or the population mean. And we can do this in Excel if we type in this cell equals the average, so spell out the word average, open parentheses, of the cell range you want to take the average of. So I just highlighted A2 through A11 and close parentheses and press enter, and it computes the same average we got, which was 79. Now, of course, I want mu to be copy and pasted throughout all of these cells. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell this cell to just be equal to B2, sorry. Okay. Now, Excel does a cool thing where if you drag down, it's going to copy a formula. Now, this formula specifically is telling Excel to equal the cell above it, which is fine for us because the cell above it is 79. We won't always want to drag our formulas because it may change what numbers it's pulling from the formulas, but in this case, it's fine. We'll practice more as we go. In this column, we want to subtract the score minus mu. So I'm going to say equals, I'm going to toggle over to A2 minus B2. So it will take the score and subtract the population mean. We press enter, and it's going to give me 3, which is what we got on our table. Now, this is where Excel becomes really handy because if I select that cell and drag it down just once, so notice it went from A2 minus B2. If I drag it down, it's now doing A3 minus B3, which is what we want to have happen. So Excel is smart enough to copy the formulas and change your input values when you drag from the little corner. So I'm going to drag this all the way down because it's going to compute the differences between the score and the population mean. Awesome. Now, of course, we want to take these numbers and we want to square them. That's my next column. So I'm going to press enter. I'm going to toggle over to C2, which has what I'm wanting to square, and I'm going to press up caret 2, which will square that number. Okay, same vibe. We drag the little corner all the way down. It's going to square all of those numbers for us. Awesome. Now, the next thing we wanted to do is we wanted to sum this data. Now, I'm putting that as a title here, so you can see that this cell that I'm currently highlighted in is going to sum the data. I will press equals, sum, open parentheses, and again, select the cells I want to add together. So we are doing the sum of the square of the differences of the mean. That's the same number we got from our table. So now we're going to divide by n. Again, I'm making these notes for myself so I know what I did. We're going to take equals this cell, the sum, and we're going to divide it by the number of entries, which is 10. There's some more shortcuts to count this, but we're not going to do that today. We divide by 10. And finally, if we get our sigma, our population mean, we are going to take equals the square root, SQRT, of that cell D13. Close parentheses, press enter. And voila, we have the same sigma that we found on our paper. Now, obviously, this is showing a lot of decimal points because it's giving us a very accurate number. This button right here, where it says number up at the top of my screen, will change how many decimals are showing, whether you want more or less. So we want less decimals to show. Boom, 9.8. Obviously, you can round yourself, but that's just interesting. Okay, cool. So that's how you use Excel to find the population standard deviation. If we were using our calculator, what we would do is we'd go to stat, we'd go to edit, we'd type in all of that data. Ignore L2 for right now, I'm just getting ahead of myself. We would press stat, we would press calculate, and we're doing one variable statistics with that first list. So I make sure L1 is the list that I'm using before I press calculate. And if you see, the population standard deviation, sigma, is the same number we got in Excel, which is awesome. Okay, if we go and we want to continue this, but we only want to do the sample standard deviation, we're going to basically copy Control C, Control V my titles. But this time, part 4, or example 4, we're only using 62, 88, 77, and 68 as my sample. So now this actually should be X bar. And if I'm being specific, it should be X bar. And this should also be X bar. No real cute way to write that mathematically inside Excel to make it actually look like a mu or an X bar. We do our best. But again, we want to find the sample mean. So we average, spell out the word average, these cells together. We want to use that number over and over again. And then I just drag it down. And we notice it changed from G2 to G3 to G4. So we're pulling the cell above. We're going to subtract by taking X sub I minus X bar for each of these. Drag it down. We're going to square that value. Drag that down. And then we're going to find the sum. Remember, the formula for sum is equals sum, open parentheses, and you drag it all the way down, close parentheses, and enter. We're going to do the sum divided by the degrees of freedom. You get it. So we're going to do this divided by, there was 4 minus 1. And then to find the sample standard deviation, which is S, we are going to take the square root of that number. And boom. In our notes, we found this to be 11.3, so I can just change my decimals to only show one decimal, and voila, we have found the sample standard deviation using Excel. In the calculator, it works the exact same as population standard deviation, except for that when you go to stat and to edit, you need to make sure your second list only has the sample you pulled, or your list in general. And when we go to calculate, just ensure that the list that your sample is typed into, which for me was L2, is in the list that you're using for the one variable statistics. We press enter, and this time we're not doing population because that's dividing by n. We need to make sure we're looking at sample standard deviation so that it divides by n minus 1. So when you're using a sample, you be sure to use SX for the sample standard deviation. But when you're using a population in the same scene, you can use sigma of x. Okay, that's a moment for you to think about. Let me be sure there was nothing else I was supposed to show you on here. I don't think that there was. If there was, I'll show you when I'm back next time. The end.